Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Oneness Junkie podcast, hosted by me, Lydia Smith, a self-proclaimed Oneness Junkie. Oneness Junkie is a place to be inspired, encouraged, and supported. Learn from the individuals who are working to make the world a better place. Let's meet today's guest. Hi, everybody. This is Lydia. And today I have a special guest with me. I'm sitting here with Kaitlyn Kenealy. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So you're in Wisconsin, right? Is it cold there?
Actually today, it's a little bit warmer. So we hit the 70s, but I mean, last week and the week before we were still in the 30s. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I'm like as about as low south in the United States as you can get. And it was like, we're having a heat wave. It's like 90 degrees in May. So yeah, well, sometimes I wish I was up that north, and then sometimes I realize I just don't like it that cold.
Yeah, I don't know. I know, but every year I say the same thing, like, oh, it'd be so nice to go somewhere warm. And then everybody's like, oh, but don't you like all of the seasons? I was like, I don't think we get all 4 seasons anymore. I feel like fall lasted for like a week and then we were already into winter. So yeah, somewhere warm at some point, I think would be definitely.
Well, and I talked to a friend yesterday in Pittsburgh and he said it was 41 yesterday morning. So he said he hasn't opened his pool yet. So, it's still cold, in other parts as well. So even a little bit further south.
Well, whenever you want to come and visit.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure. So one of the things that my regular listeners know about my episodes is that I like to introduce whether I know or don't know my speaker, my guest, because a lot of times I'm just getting to know them along with the audience as well. So today I do not know Kaitlyn, and I met Kaitlyn through a speakers networking group. So we connected online, and then we had a brief conversation to talk about her being a guest, and she accepted, and I'm thrilled for y'all to get to know her. She's got a lot of neat things that she's done in her life that help her have an understanding about her topic. And today's topic that we're going to focus on is general mental health. And this is May, and this is Mental Health Month. So a lot of my guests this month are going to be talking about things related to mental health. So Kaitlyn, I would like you to give some background on, you, so the audience can feel like they know who we're speaking to today, and just so we can connect with you through the podcast.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. I am from the Wisconsin area, born and raised. I feel like I've moved away several times, but only to Minnesota, because that's where I went to graduate school and lived there for about 6 or 7 years. But yes, native to Wisconsin. I am currently a psychotherapist, and I own my own private practice. So that is exciting. Now, if you would have asked me when I started this journey of schooling, if I would have been a therapist, I would have told you absolutely not. I was originally going to college to be an actress. And then I was like,
see that.
Yeah,
I can see that. You could be.
I know. Well, I love being on stage. I love all of those things, but I kind of talked myself out of it. And then I was like, oh, Kaitlyn, go be a teacher because, why not? So I spent a long time, a couple years actually, going for teaching. Like I was like 3 years deep, and I will never forget. I was sitting in a classroom because obviously you have to shadow and do those things. And I just thought to myself, it was no joke, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. Like, that's what I said. So I literally switched my path, and then, right, why not be a history major? Because that's leading the nation in jobs. But I loved history. And then I ended up taking my first gender and women's studies class, and that completely changed the trajectory of my path. Wow. So then, yes, like, honestly, I was like, oh my goodness, there's women in history. There's, social justice and all of these great things. So Anyway, then I decided to get my first master's degree in gender and women's studies. Loved it. Seriously is foundational into life therapy now today. I got to teach college when I was there, wrote a thesis, all that fun stuff.
Wow.
And then I worked as an academic and financial aid advisor, and I just felt like everything I was doing was counseling. So
Wow.
I decided to move back home and get a second master's degree. And then now here I am. Definitely. I tell everybody, for me, it's just been about following my passion and following my heart, but building my resume around it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Volunteering, doing those things. I co-chair the Suicide Prevention Committee and Mental Health Access Committee here in town. Very involved in the community where I can be, while also, continuing to build my practice and do those things.
Well, and your bio says you just won an award. Tell us about that award that you did a speech for. I want the audience to know what you won. Yeah. And this was for all of Wisconsin, like a state award?
Yeah. So in January, I won Young Professional of the Year. And so that was through our YPF program. And then just 2 weeks ago, I accepted the award for the Woman of Achievement Award through our local women's fund. I feel like they have national ones and different ones, but for my town, did that. So gave a speech in front of 400 people. I was so nervous. Oh my goodness. I was sweating all day. I could barely eat. And of course, I'm the closer too. So you have to sit through the whole program. But it turned out to be beautiful and wonderful. People said they laughed, they cried, they laughed and they cried. And I got a standing ovation. So all in all, it was nice to be recognized. And I don't know who nominated me, but I got the nomination and then ended up winning. So
that's amazing. Can I just ask you a question? Yeah. By the way, audience, we did not prepare like what is specifically, we have a topic, mental health and taking the stigma away from mental health, but I'm going to ask questions along the way because I'm actually genuinely curious. Okay. So when you went to school for women and gender studies, like kind of what is the focus? Like what's kind of the curriculum? What type of titles does your program make you take as far as courses? I'm just curious, like what does that represent?
So we took feminist pedagogy. So like how to teach people from a feminist perspective. Okay. So like being in the classroom and learning those different things. You're learning about different socioeconomics, learning about intersectionality. I took a class in there about autobiographies. That's how I got the inspiration to write my book, because I just published my book too. It came out about a month ago.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but in my gender and women's studies, that course is what, like, I was like, oh my goodness, I need to do this. So that's what kind of lit the fire for me to actually follow through with that. I mean, I just feel like it's so broad, yet you hit on so many different things of intersectionality with the gender and women's studies master's degree. And they don't have like a clear path. Like you take this and then all of a sudden you become this. You have to figure those pieces out. And I loved teaching, again, kind of in front of people, being on stage a little bit. And it was foundational. I mean, things I had never thought about before were
it just
highlighted.
Opens your eyes, right?
Absolutely.
And now you can take that information and help open our eyes, or the people that you talk to out there in the world, whether it's on a stage or a podcast or a TV show or what have you, right?
Yeah, because really, the personal is political, and, that type of energy and the things that we learned in that program, that's what every class was kind of like. And then writing my thesis too was also great. I interviewed people across the lifespan on how they came to feminism, if they claimed the label or not. And again, another way for me to be like, that's kind of how I integrated into my book as well. So it parallels, right? I don't know. It was one of the hardest, yet greatest experiences that I've had, and truly shaped me for these other experiences and what I'm currently doing.
Did the therapist role or studies come after the gender?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So the first one was gender and women's studies. Then I worked as an academic and financial aid advisor. I just felt like everything I was doing, people are coming to you and they're like, Kaitlyn, I want to drop this class, when it really has nothing to do with the class. It's what's going on at home, which is exactly what happens in therapy. right?
Yeah.
They're coming to you because we think this is the issue, but when we explore it, it's usually these other things that need to be resolved. And so I was just like, everything I'm doing is counseling. I might as well go and do it again. Again, just following like that inner voice, that inner dialogue, having no rationale for it, but being like, okay, I'm going to follow my passion and follow my heart. Obviously try to be strategic with jobs and around that, because obviously I had to pay for it. So yeah, that's what I've always done. And that's what I advise people on. Mm-hmm.
Well, and it sounds like you learned through that position how to ask good questions, because they're thinking they're on one reason, but then when you dug a little deeper, like a investigator or detective, you've helped them to get to the root of what the real issue was. And so that really is, like a therapy role, right?
Yep.
So, okay. So, and we'll talk throughout the podcast about your book. Tell us a little bit about what's the title, and let's go ahead and dive into that so we can then reference it while we're talking through the next 45 minutes.
Okay. So the title of the book it's Healing is Messy AF. Buckle up, because the only way out is through. So healing is messy as fuck, for those that don't know what AF means. But yeah, it's, I don't like to totally call it a workbook, but it kind of is. It borders on that. It's a workbook about investing in yourself. It's a window into therapy. It's my personal story, my clinical story, patient stories, all intertwined into mental health topics. And then I give people a tangible skill or tools that they could utilize if they want to. So yeah.
Did you have you didn't go back as far as like your childhood, but did you have like a traditional what would be considered normal childhood, or was it challenging? Like, did you have challenge?
Yes, very challenging is what I would say. Yes.
So that helps to stimulate curiosity about some of the things that you were driven to go follow,
Absolutely.
because you had your own answers.
Yeah, one of the chapters is on trauma, right? And my second book that I'm working on is like, because each chapter in this book could be its own book. Okay. So I'm starting with the trauma chapter and figuring out how I want to present that next. But yes, like recognizing and realizing these things when you look back, and it's really shaped me and helped me be a better clinician today with that. And so in that trauma chapter, I'm asking people, go find your ACE score if you've never heard of that, right?
Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So the ACE score is the adverse childhood experiences. And it was a study that was done, and the higher your score is on this assessment, the greater risk you are for health issues, domestic violence, alcohol abuse, all these different things. Now, is knowing your ACE score going to be the end all to be all? No, but it's just a better way, because the more we can know ourselves and why, right? Maybe why we act this way genetically, environmentally, or both of them, the better we can heal ourselves moving forward. And so that's kind of the general theme throughout. And I obviously can relate, and I do give a snippet of my personal experiences throughout, but I didn't want to make the book about me.
Right.
Yeah.
Is the ACE, like, for the listeners who are like, I want to figure out my ACE score, is that like a test floating out there on the internet that you can just find and then answer the questions? Is it like a downloadable PDF or something?
Yes.
Like, and you work out. Okay. I'm curious.
And then in my book too, we just did a scan code. Then you can literally, if your phone, you want to do that, you scan it and then the test comes up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You mean like the test comes up, or the results?
No, the like, when you go to the store or
the QR code.
Now, and now you can do that, and then the test will just pop up, and you can take it on there if you want to just do it from your phone.
Okay. Yeah. And then do you get the results like that, or how does it?
Yeah, it's like 10 questions. It's not very complicated. But
that's simple.
Yes, the higher but the higher that score is, again, the greater risk you see in a lot of these different areas that pertain to mental health. So again, I try to weave that in throughout the chapters too. I mean, because one of the chapters is on domestic violence. Another one is on rape, trauma, suicide ideation. And then there's anxiety, then there's self-care and affirmation. So, different things that correlate with mental health, but knowing your ACE score, is, I think, important for you along your journey.
Well,
and I didn't learn that until my second master's degree.
Wow. Yeah. So a lot of times when you have like a family trauma or challenges, that interjects you into therapy early. And so you start to work with the therapist at an earlier age, right? But sometimes you can just kind of skate through life, avoiding it. And then things come up later in life. They just kind of build on top of each other, right? Until you're 45 and you have a breakdown.
Well, exactly. And so the reason for the trauma chapter is very important. Well, I think all the chapters are. But again, when we can start to recognize that trauma is literally anything that dysregulates your nervous system. Think about on a daily basis how many times your nervous system could just become dysregulated. And then when you start to go further back. So again, trying to help people understand what trauma actually is. People still think, oh, well, I'm not a war veteran, so I don't have any trauma. It's like that is so far off. But we need to be able to take these skills and break them down so people can understand them too. And that's really what my book does, is taking these broader concepts, making it more manageable and kind of, bite size. So you feel like, oh, okay, I can kind of understand that. And oh, wait, I'm not alone either. And wow, she's experienced this while still having all these other things. I think just bring a definite human connectedness to the book.
I love that definition of trauma and the way that you explain it, because I've, through my own investigation of my life and discover personal development and self-awareness, that I've been interested in, trying to work through and heal stuff in my own life. And you're talking about anything that dysregulates your nervous system. There are so many things that people probably dismiss that they don't think is traumatic, but actually it would be considered traumatic. You think about, like you said, a war veteran, and they hear, like my nephew went to Afghanistan and he came to Houston, and we're a very fourth largest city in the United States. Mm-hmm. There's like a siren all the time. And even like my sister, who's lived in Colorado for 30 years, when she came to Houston, she couldn't believe how often you hear sirens. And I'm used to it, right? Mm-hmm. I've been here for my whole life, and I don't know any differently. And so it actually dysregulates my nervous system, but I'm not aware of it. I'm totally immune to it. At the conscious level, but there's an actual responsive reaction going on. So this city is actually like a high anxiety city. Everyone is moving fast, driving fast. You got to watch, you have to be hyper vigilant. You have to watch out. And it's like, when I can, which I'm taking care of I'm not taking care of her, but she's 87. So I'm here to be available for my mom until she no longer needs me, and she wants to stay in Houston. But when she is no longer needs me, when she passes, I don't plan on staying in the city because I feel like there are calmer, more peaceful places in the world that I could live. And I just want to experience life at a more peaceful level. So I'm just giving that as an example because no one would ever consider that to be traumatic, like living in a city, right? That doesn't, it seems so nominal, right? So just small, but I do believe that there is some contribution of daily anxiety that gets contributed by the city that I live in. And
absolutely.
So I'm aware of that.
I love that. And I think that that's a great example. And so the platform that I have now in the book and everything that I'm doing is to break the stigma on mental health. And one of those pieces is going to be to understand what trauma actually is, what trauma actually does to your body. So I'm EMDR trained as well. So eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's one of the most effective modalities to treat trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And so a good book, if anybody's interested, is The Body Keeps Score. So it talks about how we trap emotions in our body. And what EMDR does, we have to go through a whole protocol, but we identify a memory that's affiliated with your symptom that could be a trapped emotion. And so those different things. And then process through eye movements. So it's my favorite modality to use. It's the most effective. And, talk therapy is great, but when you see what this does for people, it's almost like magic.
Yeah.
They walk in, and again, they come in thinking that it's one thing, but through the protocol and what we process, it turns out to be something different. And so you're actually healing that memory. And typically you don't have to go with what they came in for.
Yeah, I love that. My other sister, I have several, was a practicing therapist. She's not practicing right now, but she was trained in EMDR and had some powerful experiences. So I love that. And so anyone who is suffering from any kind of anxiety, depression, sadness, find an EMDR therapist in your area. Do you have to be local though, right? That's not something that can be done on Zoom, right?
Well, so because of COVID, some practitioners have had to make adjustments. So some people use the light bar, I use the light bar, some people use their hands, some people use different technologies. So I would say that there is stuff out there. I'm not specifically trained in that, but for me and my experience, I would say try to find somebody that's in person to start with, and then maybe they could help navigate you.
Yeah.
Based upon what you need is. Yeah.
So, okay. So we've talked about kind of the definition of trauma. Do you, a lot of people say the stigma around mental health. Let's just go to the foundational of what is a stigma and what is the stigma of mental health. And then let's move ourselves up to your plight of what you want people to understand about mental health. So what do people think about mental health? Like, what's the stigma everybody's talking about that we're trying to get away from? Let's have a baseline.
Okay. Yeah. Well, chapter 1 of my book is breaking the stigma. So what I talk about is the 5 different components that people have labeled as why they're not coming in. I think breaking the stigma is multi-layered though. It's a stigma to even look. It's a stigma to reach out to somebody, to get them to come into the door, and then to even start therapy. And so I think even just the general feeling around it is the biggest stigma. So for me, it's about breaking that, getting people comfortable with that topic. That's where the book can come into play. Like, oh, this doesn't seem so scary. I think it's all the judgment behind it. Because
the vulnerability.
Yes. And you're gonna, people still say, well, am I crazy? Well, and I say, what is the definition of crazy? People still ask, are you going to lock me up? I'm like, what? Where am I? What? You know what I mean? Like, so
there's perceptions.
So that judgment and that shame, I think, are the 2 biggest layers that we have to work through. And I'm not saying that we can completely eliminate those, but the more we talk about it and the less shame and judgment that's affiliated with it, and the proper understanding of what therapy actually is, I think if we could work through those 2, then those other pieces won't seem as big, of getting them in the door, the financial piece of things. So that hopefully that kind of answers.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, because I started therapy in like 1990. I started therapy because I had just lived in Italy. And when I came home, I was depressed that I had to come home to America.
Yes.
Because I was having so much fun in Italy. But I also wanted to go back. But I also recognized that I had feelings that I didn't like having. And so I wanted to go talk to someone. But the reason I'm sharing that is I was young. I was 20, maybe 1 years old. And my family had therapy, a background in therapy. Like my sister was studying to be a therapist. So it wasn't as taboo as maybe a family that's not exposed to therapy. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think my mom and my older sister had already been through mental health challenges. So it wasn't totally new. But what I want to share with the audience is when you do decide to make that decision and take the first step and, Google your area or make a phone call or reach out to a therapist, just see yourself as stepping into your courage. that is like a first step into you living into all that you were created to be. Instead of finding it like your vulnerability and your weakness, see it as your courage and your attempt to. And one of the things you said earlier before we were recording is you want to help people learn how to invest in themselves. And that's literally, what it is when you go to therapy. You're investing in your personal self and your life, right? To create your own life. So do you want to talk a little bit about that concept?
Yeah. I, and the book and everybody else, I tell everybody shop around for a therapist because we're all different. You know what I mean? I'm assertive. I'm direct. I'm solution focused. That might not work for you. And that's okay. So as a clinician, we need to be more comfortable with that. We say we are, but are we just, trying to hold on to patients? Like, well, I don't. I just want them to find somebody that's going to work for them. Again, shop around.
Your match, find your match.
But that can change too. So we have to be comfortable with that. Is someone may start with me and we're good for like 6 to 8 sessions. Maybe they got what they needed from me, but now they need a different approach. So it's also training people that this is your treatment. I tell everybody, if you invest in this process, you're going to have an outcome. If you don't invest in this process, you won't. And that's okay. Like, I'm not going to do the work for you. 10% of therapy is like what happens inside those walls. 90% is kind of what happens outside. So again, finding somebody that you connect with, like all the research shows, is going to move mountains compared to, because that's another stigma. They're going to go to a therapist and then they're turned away, like they don't like them. So now they're turned off to it. So again, that's another stigma. And again, so not only the shame and the guilt and finding the proper therapist, but if we treated therapy the way that we treat physical health, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm just going to my brain doctor appointment, all of those things, just so that we could start to normalize it. I'm part of an initiative here in town where we provide therapy in the school districts. So basically pick up my clinic, go in there, provide therapy, and then, I go back to the clinic. But to me, that's so great because we're seeing that shift of we're normalizing it within the schools. And
when they're younger.
Yes. And so that's also going to be key too, because a lot of what we're doing is the back end of things. If we can take a more proactive approach, it's not that we won't need this, we will still need it, but it'll be needed in a different way. So we're very reactive to things, not starting until later in life, which is okay. But can you imagine if we treated it the way we treated physical health? And therapy is just something that we did. So that's my vision. And that's what I'm trying to advocate for.
Well, and what I hear you saying, and I'll just reiterate it in a different way, is that when you make the phone call and you're trying to find your match, you need to have a set of questions that matter to you, right? To ask these people. And if your therapist is uncomfortable with your questions, then they're not the right therapist for you, right? So you need a therapist who's comfortable with the questions and comfortable with, you can preface it by saying, I'm just trying to find the right match for my circumstances. And, I remember you and I both have had, under an experience, but I remember when I was searching for someone, like I really wanted someone who understood suicide, because I just felt like they would have just a different understanding rather than just reading about it in a book, like if they had actually experienced it for their own personal life, that they would have a much better ability to, I don't know, I felt like provide empathy for me.
Well, that validation and that connection piece. Yeah. That's what you're looking
or like,
for.
abuse, like if, how much experience, asking your therapist, like how much experience or how comfortable are you with, physical abuse or emotional abuse, or, like based on, I just ask the questions, like whatever your makeup is. The other thing I wanted to bring out about what I was hearing you say is that, say you have 6 sessions with your therapist and you're like, okay, well, I've gone to a few sessions and they felt a little stagnant, like they didn't really know where to go from there. And you feel like maybe that's all they can take you to. It's okay to go find another one that helps you go to whatever new level that you think that you've achieved to, that you're looking for. If you're therapist that you had 6 sessions with tapped out on ideas or information or whatever, it's okay to say, I'm going to, take a break and go find what works for you. Keep looking, don't stop, right?
Yeah. Well,
Just
and
because
those
your
skills,
therapist can't.
Yeah, that skill of asserting yourself, you know what I mean? And having that uncomfortable conversation of being, okay, I'm not sure
practice.
This is a yes. And so again, what we do in these sessions is it's mirroring, right? I think that's great. And what I say is I appreciate your honesty, and that's what I give to you. Or even for me, if it's not going anywhere, I would just say, I can have all these degrees and all this stuff that doesn't matter, because I just believe in having honest conversations. So I'm feeling like we're not moving the dial. I'm feeling like I'm not helping you. And it's just, if we can make it work, then we make it work. Or otherwise I assist them in helping them find somebody else who could make it work for them.
And I would like to encourage everyone to not, even though the natural instinct is to be afraid to have that conversation with your therapist, just know that therapist is probably the most skilled and educated to handle a conversation like that. And they've probably built up enough of a skin on them to where they know it's not personal. They're educated to know it's not personal. They've been prepared for these types of scenarios. And that if they've been doing therapy for very long, it's already happened. You're not the first one. So I'm trying to break the stigma of fear around confronting your therapist, because they're probably the one who's going to be the most safe place to build up your confidence to say those things in practice. They're going to appreciate you practicing, and they're going to go, wow, you really have grown and you really have learned from me. And wow, I'm proud of you, so have that conversation. Don't be afraid of it. Invest in yourself and, keep your life moving forward. Right.
Yes. It's your treatment. And so, yes, that's what I always try to say. This is, it's going to sting my heart, because obviously I want to help everybody, but realistically, I'm not for everybody, and I'm okay with that. But like you're saying, yes, we would be the safest place to have those tougher conversations and work through those things. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, just because your book is a good context for you, let's go through some of the points, share with us some of the points inside the meat of the book, so that if anyone is curious about building themselves up to want to, go to a therapist, the book is a good starting point, right? It's a very good workbook tool that you can get and then walk yourself through. If you feel like you want to be informed and educated and you've never considered going to a therapist, but you think it's time to start looking into that, it's probably a good idea to get a book or something to get yourself prepared to be ready for what's coming. Right. So tell us a little bit about the insight, because you said the first chapter was basically the stigma.
Identifying those barriers. I say shop around for a therapist. I say write down your questions, bring them. A lot of people. So I do a free consultation, 15-20 minutes. Come in, ask me questions, get to know me, see if it's going to work out. And then I don't do I let them leave, and then I let them know if they you let me know if you want to work with me, if you think this is going to work out. So it's not it's
never a sales pitch.
Never. I am listen, I basically, so that's my approach to it. Other people may be different. So again,
I doubt any therapist is ever really sales pitching anyone, because they know better.
Yes. And then the book, again, is a window into therapy. So there's a chapter on anxiety, again, talking about my personal experience with anxiety, clinical side of things, patient testimonial, and skills. Like I said, the chapter on suicide ideation, my personal story, clinical side. And then I actually put in, not a treatment plan, a safety plan, and you can rip out that page. And my whole thing is we should all have a safety plan. It shouldn't just be for extreme cases. The chapter on trauma, I don't go into all of them because that would be a freaking encyclopedia, right? Instead of a chapter of the book. But again, doing those different things. Domestic violence is huge. So I talk about that. The chapter on rape and sexual assault, I give a snippet of my story. Again, I didn't want to make it about me, but talking about about that. And then I ask people, the activity is to maybe write down a little bit of your story, or, when you read some of those patient testimonials too, what are your thoughts on that? Again, it's just getting you to think about some of these concepts in that way. So, and then it's not all heavy, then there's self-care and there's affirmations. And so the flow of the book, it's kind of like light, heavy, heavy, light, heavy, light, light. So that's kind of the general energy from that, because also, we're talking about the heavier parts of therapy. But what I can tell you is some patients I've worked with for 3 or 4 years, and we are in the maintenance stage. So I see them every month or every couple months. And it's mainly just check-ins. And I'm kind of like their accountability buddy, because also there's different stages of therapy as well. So therapy can be just a safe place for you just to talk about things. You don't just come in there and you're like, we're going to work on treatment goal A today. Hey, Kaitlyn, this really happened.
Yeah, things happen. Life happens, right?
Yes. So that's that other piece. I'm a safe place, and we create this environment where it's not all have to be these clinical skills. It's knowing somebody, these patients I've worked with for how long, I feel like I'm a part of their family. Like, okay, well, how's mom today? And, those different things. So it's just a beautiful setting when you can eliminate that stigma and you find the right therapist, and you just can kind of go off to the races from there. So do the work up front, and then you can have a better outcome moving forward.
One thing that I've learned from doing like some of the anonymous groups when I was younger, I did like Nicotine Anonymous because I smoked, and I did another one. So I was learned way back then in those early years that you could have like a trauma or an abuse happen to you, and like you completely block it out, like that it doesn't come till you start digging and asking questions. And so when you're talking about these chapters in the book, or like, say, for instance, rape, like maybe something happened in college where you didn't want to do something, and then somebody pushed you further, and you're like, well, I was dating the guy, so it wasn't really rape, but that you identify that anytime you say no, or anytime you don't want something and somebody pushes you further than you want to go, then it's not a willfully accepting, thing. So that could be traumatic, and you don't even know that lives as a shame,
but you could be having symptoms. So this is like, when we have anxiety symptoms, it's coming from somewhere. When we have depressive symptoms, it's coming from somewhere, and based upon what you're saying, it could be an incident or something that you didn't think of in the moment because your brain is trying to protect you, so in the chapters, in the trauma chapter, talking about, the different responses that we have to trauma, right? So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Learning that, and then you start to think, oh, maybe that is my response. Have I had those other responses in other areas of my life? So absolutely. It's just to get you thinking about things in that way, and giving you words and tangible skills to practice if you choose to, so that you can have a better understanding of yourself and what's going on, or what has gone on in your environment.
Yeah. So, this is all, really good food for thought. And I love that you're one of my first episodes that will go live in Mental Health Month. So I'm really glad that yours is like a book that people can, something tangible that people can say, like, I don't really want to go see a therapist right now, but hey, I'm curious about what it's about. Like, let me kind of understand it's a mystery, right? If you've never done it before, it's mysterious. You don't really know what happens behind closed doors, and most people don't talk about what it's like. And really, I would say, for anyone who's curious, it's whatever you make it. It is not going to heal you unless you dive in and make it so. So really what the therapist is a guide, but you're the actual person doing the work. You just said it in an equation. You said 10% happens behind the closed door, and 90% happens outside of the therapist relationship. You just come back in the 10% and report what happened.
Well, and you're like, it's really pouring into your own cup. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so the best investment you are ever going to make is just figuring yourself out, or figuring out some of those pieces, right? And all of a sudden it just starts to click and it starts to go. And you're absolutely right. I'm there. I have the clinical skills, but I'm just guiding you, and I'm helping you because I see things from a different perspective. I have a different investment in you. And so like what I like to say is, I can see the carrot, I can see where you can go, but we together have to figure out how to get there. But I need you to invest in this because I can't do more work than you in your process and in your healing. And so I try to customize people's treatment, but that means that they have to let me know, do you like more videos? Do you like more worksheets? Do you like my book? So people are bringing in the book too. And, we're working through those different things. So it can be whatever you need it to be, but you have to be able to assert that and to talk about it.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have anything that you want to share with the listeners, like any personal stories that can share your own personal plight of anything that you've experienced and how you've navigated through it, so that they know that you're not just this amazing therapist, that you're a human being who's actually gone through life too? Like, has life happened to you?
Oh my God. More than I would like to admit. Like I said, I talk a little bit about that in the book, but I think this is a really good question. I would say that not that long ago, less than a year ago, lost my brother. He was 21 years old. And I think people think because I'm in this arena, I know I'm going to get emotional right now, that like
it's
somehow,
okay. We're here for you.
Yeah. Somehow, you work in this field that you're immune to it and that the people in your life don't suffer. And I just think that is completely wrong. And so I didn't do a chapter on grief because obviously I was going through it, but maybe at some point talking about that grief journey and how it really flipped everything I was doing. And I almost wanted to quit. Like I was ready to be done.
I
was
understand.
like, how am I supposed to do this? But with that is what I would say is investment into myself, reinvestment into, like, I'm very big on practicing what I preach. So when I ask other people to do these things, I was like, okay, Kaitlyn, well, now I've done the skills. I thought I was good. And then life, threw me a very big,
you have to walk the path.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say that's been the most recent trauma that has shattered a lot of things. And mental health doesn't discriminate. So just because you have somebody in your family doesn't mean that, you can save them because you're in this arena. But if we can break the stigma and we can work towards that and just treat mental health as a human right, I think we could eliminate a lot of heartache and things that don't have to happen.
Were y'all close? How many years apart were y'all?
So he was 21 and I'm 36. So
quite a bit. Wow.
Yeah.
Was he your youngest sibling?
Yeah. So I'm actually one of 6.
Wow. My goodness. So you have a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And did he suffer with mental health issues like most of his life? Like, was it identified?
I think, untreated when you don't treat it, and there's only so much you can do, you know what I mean? Yeah. You can only guide. And we were, so, I'm at a different stage of life, but you can only lead. And, I don't think anybody knew it was as bad as it was. I would say that. Yeah. I didn't even know that it was that bad.
And you know that I do understand, because I was just talking to my third sister. I'm one of 4. Okay. And as all the audience who's ever listened to my podcast has probably heard me say, I had a sister who committed suicide when I was 21 and she was 29. And it was a surprise. It wasn't something that, we thought was, ready to happen. Yeah. We never is, but knowing her own mental health struggles, like it wasn't like that surprising. She had been in and out of patient treatment and stuff and had drug addictions and things like that in the past. So I do understand. Yeah. And I do also understand how the age gap, because like I was graduating from college and living my life. She was going through 9 years older life stuff that I wasn't relating to. And so, there's a big gap. And so I wanted to help her, but I also couldn't relate to her struggles because I wasn't living in her shoes. I wasn't making the choices she was making. I wasn't there in it with her. So she was living her own life. So I understand like how, the years between y'all can keep it really separate. You're living your own experience, right? But
I think it's a double-edged sword, because to me, I'm like, well, I'm right here. I as much as I help other people I would do anything for my family, And so I think a part of me, just took that for granted, in the sense of like, okay, well, they'll figure it out and everything, what I was being told was everything was fine. And then come to find out it clearly was not fine.
Yeah.
So,
you know what? And I'm just going to mention this and then we can move on from it. But I do feel like, I'm 30 years living with my sister was the 30-year anniversary. So I've had a lot of years to process it and to experience, life and thought around it. And what I'll just say to people, if you have had a suicide, or if you think you're afraid somebody in your family could commit suicide or, identifies with it, all I know from my own personal experience, and again, this is my personal opinion, it's not like trained, therapy or whatever, is that you can't control what other people choose to do with their lives. So you can't stop someone from killing themselves, because believe me, I've tried. I had a friend who was suicidal, and I thought if I spent all this time with her, then she would not do it. But I realized, like, they go to the bathroom by themselves. They take a shower by themselves. Like, literally, you cannot stop someone if they want to die. However, you can be there for them. You can ask the hard questions. You can make sure that you've done your part, because really in the end game, it's how you feel afterwards that matters, because they're gone. They made their choice. That's what they wanted for themselves. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. So you can't feel guilty like, oh, I didn't stop it. I didn't see it. I didn't. I was literally standing next to my sister when she did it. So there, like the idea that I could have somehow stopped her, was not possible, because she basically created an accident and fell off of a building 8 stories. And so as she was going over, I looked over and I was like, wow, she's falling, 2 levels. And there was literally nothing I could do. And it was a split second. So, I've had to, grapple with the fact that ultimately you can't stop someone, but you can. There's no guarantees in life. And so you just have to live each moment, letting people know how much you love them, letting them know how much they matter to you. And those are things you can do. And they're things you can do now while you're both living,
Absolutely.
So because because afterwards you can't do anything, but you have to live with what you did do beforehand, right before the event.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know for you, but for me, like, it not only that piece, but it's like changed me as a person. Like I don't even know, I'm still working through that, like relationships, French. Everything has changed for me. And so it's also like this grieving of like who I thought I was, who I'm becoming, what am I, and all those dynamics, the things I care about. So like you had said, just being there with somebody and just telling people that we love them when they're right here, and just appreciating these moments. But then also like other things that I used to do, like I don't even have any interest in it, and so that's just another piece, another layer that I continue to work through.
Like how you learn like how precious life really is. And so it can make you decide that is a waste of my minute, and I'm not going to go do that anymore. And this doesn't fulfill me anymore. It's also your perspective on just life in general, like how precious is your life, and so let's go full circle. So full circle is, if your life is precious to you, how are you going to invest in it? And how are you going to create you living your best life? Right. And if that means you have to ask questions, get a therapist, dig deeper, then do it. There's no time like the present. We have no guarantees. That's one thing. That's one thing that taught me when my sister, committed suicide, is there are no guarantees. There's no guarantees that my other sisters are going to be with me for till tomorrow. Like I have no guarantees. There's no guarantees I'll be here, tomorrow. Yes. So how am I going to live my best life today? Living in the present moment, so books like The Power of Now, that was a really big, insightful book. I wanted to ask you, I think you and I talked about Brene Brown. Do you know her?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I love her. Right. We think we said that before. So there's an Oprah podcast video on YouTube. Just type in like Oprah and Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart. And they're literally talking like within the last couple months on a split screen video about her book, Atlas of the Heart. And Oprah was kind of surmising or just going into more of a dark place about the world today and how things are just really going backwards. I mean, Roe versus Wade and all this stuff is happening. And it's like, what are we doing? And so she was asking Brene Brown, like, what do you think the answer is to all of this stuff that's happening? And Brene Brown said, I feel like the answer's in self-awareness. And what that means is each individual has to look back inside, put a mirror up, look at yourself, look at your situation, look at what's inside of you, become aware of your own self and your own issues and your own triggers and your own la. Like there's so many things. And it's like, it takes a therapist a lot of times to help guide you to those answers. And I feel like that's actually what my podcast the episodes have been focusing on, is asking yourself the questions as you listen to these different guests about where in your life can you become more self-aware, because the answers to healing the planet lies within each of us doing our part in healing ourselves first. And then when we heal ourselves, we heal the world.
Right. And like my book, healing is messy as fuck. Okay. It's not linear. It's not easy, but the outside of it, or as you're working through it, it's beautiful and it's magical. It's an unexplainable thing, but you're like, all of a sudden the dial moves. And so, the book is giving you the nod that it's okay. And it's important for people that sit in my seat. Yes, I have all the accolades, but trust me, as many accolades as I probably have as many traumas to match it, and so with that, and it's taken a long time to own those parts of my story, and I'm still working on those parts of my stories, but it's easy to look at somebody who sits in my seat and be like, oh, well, look at everything she's done, but then don't look at the reverse of it and see how long, because due to those other factors, I wouldn't be in this seat had I not, I wouldn't even be alive. Let's just be real, So it takes that. And so that's why I think my platform is so important, of pushing outside of those four walls and letting people know that you can do this if you want, but figure out what you want to do while you heal yourself.
Well, and anyone who doesn't know about studying to become a therapist, is they make you go through your own life. You have to dig and excavate your own life to know what you're going to be asking other people to do. Right. So, I mean, therapists have had to learn the parts of themselves that make up, and they say that people teach what they need to learn. So just know that your therapist is a real human being with real human issues and traumas and challenges and life moments, and they're going through it too. So you got to give them a little bit of grace, as well. Right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, in wrapping up, do you have anything in particular that we didn't cover that you want to express to the audience? Do you feel complete? Do you want to share anything?
I mean, it feels good. I feel this is a good ending place. I think the biggest thing, again, is if I can give you a free pass, this is your free pass on healing and digging into yourself. And if it's not through my book, that's okay. But figuring out and giving yourself that little bit of time. So I look at it as a 1% investment every day. So that's what I would say. Can you invest in yourself 1% every day? And whatever that 1% is, that's what you get to decide. If it's 10 minutes a day, if it's an hour every other day, if it's exercise, whatever that is. But then eventually, right, when you look back, if you invest in yourself 1% every day, if I start today, I look back in 2 weeks, I've done 14 things, right? Or if I do it for 30 days, now I've done 30 things. And so again, when we can start to chip away at that and 1% every day, it makes it feel more manageable and tangible.
That's called progress.
Yeah.
And I find that it's in the action, taking action. It's not the results as much as taking the action that helps me feel in control.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times I'll feel out of control. Like if I'm eating too much or something, I'll feel out of control. But if I just take the steps to take action, I all of a sudden, I'm not there. I haven't lost the 50 pounds or whatever, but I feel in control of myself. And that's what gives me the peace of mind, right?
Yeah.
And calms the anxiety. So really just full circle, wrapping it up. I mean, if you want to find Kaitlyn Kenealy and understand, more about her book or find her book, tell us how a listener can find your book, because I'm interested in getting one. Yeah.
If you want to order it from me, I have a specific website. I mean, I can send that to you as well. Otherwise,
what's the website?
Off the top of my head, it's basically Kaitlyn Kenealy. It's my Kajabi website. But otherwise it's on Amazon too. So if you don't want to personally buy it from me, because people are buying it for me and then I'm signing it and sending it to them.
Oh, I want that one.
You want that one? Okay. I can send you the link. It's basically like KaitlynKenealy.com. So you can email me. My Instagram is also just Kaitlyn Kenealy. So any way of getting in contact with me, I can basically get that sent to you if you want the signed version. Otherwise, I would say it's just on Amazon and you can type in Healing is Messy AF.
That's exciting. I'm so excited for you. Gosh, thank you so much. One of the things that I do, and I know you listened to one of the episodes, one of the things that I came up with is, and I get emotional because I really love how I believe in source and the universe and God. I call all those things the same. And I love how God connects me with amazing people that are doing amazing things in the world. And I love how I get to meet these amazing people. I mean, I didn't know you before today, and now I feel like really connected. I feel very connected to you, and I hope my audience does too.
I do too.
And finds your work that you're doing to help make the world a better place. I hope that this lands in the right hands of the people who are really seeking it. And that's really what the purpose of my podcast is just to get information out, to highlight people like you and me who are just wanting to share their lives so that the world becomes a better place. And Kaitlyn, that's exactly who I see you to be, the light that you are, shining bright, the joy that you exude, the care and compassion and empathy that you represent in who you are. And I hope that more people, whether it's through speaking engagements or TV or media or podcasting or websites or book reads. I mean, I just can't wait for more people to get to know, what you're trying to do and what you are doing in the world. And I just thank you for, your time today to spend talking about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And, if we can discuss, maybe there's a specific topic that we want to talk about on another episode, you can come back and we can discuss different, subject matters as a subject matter expert. So anyway, thank you so much. So I'm going to wrap it up and just really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye. We've reached the end of this episode. If you'd like to continue with this inspirational journey, Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. If you are a self-proclaimed oneness junkie, get yourself a t-shirt and spread the message of oneness in your community. And finally, if you have a story to share or know someone that should be a guest on this podcast, contact us at onenessjunkie.com. See you next time. And remember, when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Compassion starts with you and me.